Shalom and welcome to Biblical Faith with Sam Peak. We invite you to join us as Sam brings a study in the Torah from the Jewish sages. And now our speaker, Sam Peak.
Shalom Aleichem. So we're here tonight and we're going to study for a little bit in a portion of the Mishnah, which is called Pirkei Avot, the chapters of the fathers. We're using a really nice sefer put out by Art Scroll by actually put together, the editor, Rabbi Tuvi Basser. But it's based on the Maharal, his commentary on Pirkei Avot. And the Maharal was Rabbi Judah Loew of Prague, a very, very famous rabbi, and an unbelievable teacher of the Torah, who had a I don't want to say unusual, but a really unique way of looking at certain things, and his own kind of system, at least vocabulary, let's put it that way, his own kind of vocabulary about explaining the way the world works and the way everything fits together. And anyway, we've been doing it for a while. We're actually, if I remember correctly, and y'all correct me if I'm wrong, we are in chapter 3 of Pirkei Avot, and we're going to begin Mishnah number 7, okay? So let's first read the Mishnah, which is Rabbi Chalafta ben Dosa of Kefar Chananya. He used to say, if 10 people sit together and engage in the study of the Torah, then the Shekhinah, the divine presence, rests among them, as it is said. And he quotes from Tehillim 82:1, Psalm, the 82nd Psalm, verse 1. Hashem stands in the assembly of Hashem, or God stands in the assembly of God. How do we know this also, he says, even of 5 people? For it is said, now from the prophet Amos 9:6, he has established his bundle upon earth. And how do we know this even of 3 people, he says? For it is said, again Tehillim 82:1, in the midst of judges he shall judge. Hold on. How do we know this even of 2 people? In other words, that the Shekhinah rests among them. For it is said, and he goes to the prophet Malachi 3:16, then those who fear Hashem spoke to one another, and Hashem listened and heard. Then he says, how do we know this even of 1 person? If only 1 person is studying Torah. For it is said, Shmot, Exodus 20, verse 21, in every place where I will cause my name to be mentioned, I will come to you and bless you. So basically what he does is he begins to tell us the idea that anytime these particular numbers of people are involved in the study of Torah, that the Shekhinah is present among them, okay? And so we have to ask a whole lot of questions here. For every group, he goes to a proof text, which may not make sense to us on our first reading of this. We may read it and say, well, how does he get, for instance, where he says, how do we know this even of 5, okay? Because from Amos 9:6, he has established his bundle upon the earth. Well, what in the world does that mean? Well, let's let the Maharal take us through all of this and see what it says, okay? He begins by saying, why does this Mishnah discuss groups of various sizes that study the Torah together? If the divine presence, if the Shekhinah rests with even 1 person, then why is Rabbi Chalafta ben Dosa, why is he mentioning all these other different sizes of groups? Why bother to mention 2, 3, 5, and 10 people? And the answer is because every one of these numbers has a very special distinction, the Maharal says, which he wants now to explain. He begins with the number 10 and says that the number 10 is a complete group because 10 is the base of the number system of the Torah. We can understand that. We use a decimal system in our mathematical calculations that's based on a 10 system, okay? Listen to what the Maharal says. The way he explains this is quite unique. He says, every number that is less than 10 is just a collection of units which can still be added to. For example, if we add adding to 3, add 1 to 3, that gives us 4, okay? Adding to 4, if we add another 1 to 4, that gives us 5, and so on. But when a collection of numbers reaches 10, then it becomes a complete group that actually, he says, cannot be increased in this sense. Because any increase, such like adding 1 to get 11, it just repeats the digits over that have already been listed. Our numbers are 1 to 10. When we reach 10, there's not another number, okay? If we add another, we're still adding something that's already before it, okay? That's the idea, and that's what makes 10 a complete unit or a complete group of numbers, no more to it. And that's the answer, by the way, to why a minyan for prayer is a minimum of 10. It can also be 100, or it can also be 12. But the addition of more to the 10 doesn't actually add to that group. It's very interesting. But one less than that, it's not complete. Okay? And I think he'll mention that again. We'll let him tell us again, probably in a better way. So he says the digits, it just repeats itself, repeats the digits over starting at 1 without introducing any new qualities, is his word for it, qualities. As a practical illustration, yeah, he's going to tell us now. I should have read him. I'm bad about that, aren't I? Looks, after all those years of teaching the Ramchal and Derek Hashem, I would learn my lesson, but obviously I don't. So as a practical illustration, 10 Jews are considered a community, a complete community, in the context of laws which revolve around God's holiness. So the quorum for public prayer is 10. A minyan. Excuse me. And adding to the quorum doesn't add another quality to it. It makes no qualitative difference, all right? That is the characteristic of a group as distinct from an individual. Once it is complete, it can't be further completed. It is reasonable, he says, that Hashem associates himself with a quorum of 10. Why? Because since he who is complete is found with that which is also complete. Okay? And he's going to show us a very interesting thing in a minute that we'll do well to get a hold of. It's very interesting. He says each number that's mentioned in this Mishnah has a unique characteristic, and he wants to tell us what those are. So the number 1, he says 1 does not include anything else. So it's not relevant to counting in this case. Then he goes to 2. He says 2 is actually the first number of counting, and 2 is the first even number. Now when he mentions 3, he says 3 is the first odd number. That's because he's not counting 1. We think of 1 as an odd number also, but it's actually not because it's not in the list in the sense it's not relevant to counting, okay? Because it doesn't include anything else. But the number 3 includes 2 more, and it's the first odd number. 5, he says, is the very first digit that comprises an odd number and an even number. The odd number is 3, the even number is 2, all right? And 10, he says, constitutes a category or a group or a category as opposed to the individual members or qualities of that category, okay? This is also the same reason that in Kabbalah, when we outlay the attributes, when we outlay the pattern, there are 10 sfirot. And this is why Sefer Yetzirah comes and very distinctly and clearly says there are 10 and not 11. There are 10 and not 9. Okay? Okay. Because it is a category with individual members in that category. Okay. 4, he says, is not mentioned in this Mishnah because it has no characteristics, he says, that have not already been demonstrated by the numbers up to 3. All right? So that's the Maharal's explanation. If you're mathematically inclined, you can really grab a hold of these things. This is one of my downfallings. I'm not completely mathematically inclined, and which is why I always have to turn to somebody else to help me figure mathematically stuff out. But anyway, so what can I say? I mean, yeah. Okay. So he goes back now to the Mishnah and he says, you know, Rabbi Chalafta ben Dosa of Kafar Hananya says if 10 people sit together and they are engaged, their business is, that's they're busy with, literally is what the Mishnah says, in the Torah, okay? Then the Shekhinah rests among them, okay? Like he said, he says, God stands in the assembly of God. So how do we know this now even of 5? For it is said in Amos 9:6, he has established his bundle upon the earth. So he goes and he says, how does this quotation from Amos refer to the number 5? He has established his bundle upon the earth. So how in the world, where is Rabbi Chalafta ben Dosa? Where is he getting that as a connection between this verse in Amos about a bundle and 5 people, okay? He says, because 5 is the paradigm of a bundle. Because it bundles everything together. An even number, for example, 2, and an odd number, 3. They're tied together, okay? He's going to get more into it. He says, because since the divine presence, since this the Shekhinah attends even one person who is occupied or occupies himself with the Torah, he says it would seem unnecessary to me to prove that the Shekhinah also accompanies 5 people or 3 people or 2 people. However, he says this Mishnah wishes to tell us that it's actually better to study or to be occupied with the Torah as a group of 10. It's better to study as a group of 10 than as a group of 5. It's better as a group of 5 than a group of 3. It's better as 3 than with 2, and it's better with 2 than to study alone, which is not taking away. But don't make the mistake of saying, oh, well, if it's better with all that, then I don't need to study by myself. No, that's not true. Anybody who's involved in Torah study for any length of time at all knows you can study a lot by yourself, but you immediately know the quality difference when you're actually studying with someone else, because questions are generated that would not normally come, and you actually really get much closer into the text and get much more out of the text. And really what that's about is not just bouncing off of each other. It's also, it's that the Shekhinah is more present in the sense, and the more Hashem's Shekhinah is present, then the more you can get from his Torah. Okay, let's move on. He'll show us something cool in a second. He says, the Shekhinah is still even more attached to 3, and still more to 5, and it's attached still more to a group of 10. Now, he's fixing to say something extremely important. God's presence, or the Shekhinah, accompanies a human being by virtue of some point of similarity. Let's say it again. Hashem's presence, or the Shekhinah, accompanies a human being by virtue of some point of similarity. That makes sense to us if we'll think about it for just a minute. What is the main difference between what we would think of as the spiritual worlds and this physical world? The main difference is that the only way, Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan tells us from the sources, that the only way things can come close to each other, all right, or be attached to each other, or have interaction with each other, is if they are alike. If they are complete opposites, they repel each other, okay? That's what makes this physical world so important, because Hashem attaches all of these things to manifest physical objects, and then we can move the physical objects. It's only in this world, actually, that all the forces of the universe can literally interact with each other, because they can be attached to physicality, okay? But in the spiritual realm, and we have to remember, Hashem is a spirit. He doesn't have a body in that sense. So the only way they can come close to each other is if they are similar, if they are alike. It's only in those areas that they are alike that they can come close to each other. If they're opposite in other areas, those areas can't be attached to each other, okay? So, and that's the whole point. That's the whole point of all of Kabbalistic study, if it's being done correctly, is to show us that what is it that we have that separates us from Hashem? And we know it's the will to receive. What is it that really pushes us apart? It's the will to receive for ourselves alone, okay? As Rabbi Ashlag says in so many of his works, so many of his teachings, Rabbi Yehuda Lev Ashlag, the Baal HaSulam, he says that the only way a person can come close to Hashem is to transform that will to receive from a will to receive for yourself alone into a will to receive in order to give benefit to others, in order to give pleasure to Hashem, to please Him. And because then that is considered as pure giving, okay? So that is the way we're actually able to literally come close to Hashem, to be attached to Him, to do what's called devekut, or have passionate attachment to Him. That's the idea. All right? So the Maharal is saying that very, very clear to us. The Shekhinah accompanies a human being by virtue of some point of similarity. Now, what do the sages actually say? The sages also teach us they don't break it down like the Baal HaSulam does, like Rabbi Yehuda Lev Ashlag does, but the sages actually teach us how can we be similar to Him? How can we be like Him? By imitating His attributes, okay? As He is holy, you be holy. He's unique, you be holy. As He gives, as He is generous and has chesed for other people and for all creatures actually, do the same thing. Be the same way, in other words. But that's a more down-to-earth and actually a more understanding way, because sometimes when I say the will to receive for yourself alone, people say, well, I'm not self-centered, you know? And so they fool themselves. Their evil inclination immediately pulls the wool over their eyes, and so they think they have nothing to correct. And so when the sages say we imitate His attributes, we imitate His qualities, that is, and the only way you can do that is through the Torah, through studying Torah, and through living Torah, and thinking Torah. That is really a more practical way, instead of giving people that kind of an out, you know. Because if you begin to imitate His attributes, you start to begin to say, oh, well, you know, in that area of my life, I guess I can see now that I only do that for myself alone, and I'm totally self-centered in that, or in that. It starts to wake you up. Anyway, this is the idea. Again, the Shekhinah accompanies a human being by virtue of some point of similarity. Now he says we will now show how the progressively larger groups which are mentioned in this Mishnah enjoy a stronger bond with Hashem because they are increasingly similar to Him. That also is understandable, because if we are together as a group, okay, there are going to be points in my life where maybe I am more similar to Him, okay, where maybe I'm imitating Him more, or maybe I've got a handle on that will to receive myself alone. But there also may be points in your life that you may be in other areas much, much beyond me in being similar to Him. And everybody has their own unique part of their life. You see what I'm trying to say? That is more similar to Him than others, okay? But as a group, especially as beginning with 10, as a group of 10, not only is it a complete group, but it also is much more complete in the areas of our lives that would be more similar to Him, and thus the Shekhinah can attach to. So we can see the logistics of that whole thing, how it comes together. Now the Maharal is going to take a different attitude, because he is going to look at everyone not as individuals, but as a group, okay? So how do we know this? First he goes back to how do we know this even of 5, all right? He says, number 1, the number 4 represents division into individual elements, just as the 4 directions. And this is something that is real big in all of the Maharal's teaching, where he is talking about really, so we think of the 4 directions on the planet Earth, but there are really 6. He's always talking about the 6 dimensions, okay? But in this case, he wants to talk about the 4 directions, that they are completely separate and distinct from each other, north, south, east, and west, okay? The concept of a center, though, we are always measuring it from where we are, and that's the center, okay? So the concept of a center, he says, is a 5th element. And that 5th element, he says, has a very special quality, because the center is the common reference point that does what? That unifies and ties the 4 separate parts into a single entity. It makes a bundle of them, is the idea. Okay? Therefore, the number 5, he says, is the symbol of a significant group. Not a complete group. It can still be added to. Okay? So it's not a complete group like 10, but it's a significant group. The idea, he says, of separate items that are tied together by a 5th item, that is what is conveyed by the image of a bundle, just like Amos is saying, the prophet Amos. The Mishnah cites the verse, he has established his bundle upon the earth, as a reference to 5 people, because 5 contains the essential concept of a bundle, this 5th element that ties all these separate ones together, okay, in that it unifies and ties the fragmented number 4 into a cohesive group. A bundle unifies and embraces its components. In other words, there's a degree of unity in a bundle. And God is whole. He's a unity. He's whole. And he embraces absolutely everything. And it's on that point of similarity, he says, that the divine presence, that the Shekinah, accompanies a group of 5 people who occupy themselves with the Torah. Now, Rabbi Basser tells us in some notes down at the bottom of this page, if you're using the book on page 164, that he's fixing, I shouldn't say fixing to, that's a Texas, somebody from Europe will hear me say fixing to and they'll think, what language is this person speaking? Okay? So Rabbi Basser tells us that he does not include a lot of the discussion that the Maharal has on this, because the Maharal goes to 2 different places in the Oral Torah, in Tosafot, to Sukkah 13a, and he also goes to a big discussion of a passage in Barakot 6a in the Talmud. So he tells us he's leaving all of that out. So we're not getting everything the Maharal has to teach us on this, but we are getting the good stuff that Rabbi Basser did translate and put down here. Okay. So now he moves to how do we know this even of 3? And, there's a very tough word in English, so we'll just change it in a like manner, okay? The number 3 reflects a whole entity. As we explained when we were talking, he says back in chapter 3 in Mishnah number 4. 3 who have eaten, remember where he talks about 3 who have eaten at one table. Whereas the number 2 conveys division and opposites. Okay, do we understand what he's saying? Okay. A 3rd element can unify those divisions and opposites of 2 into a whole. And then he quotes again the Maharal's example. For example, gray is the in-between color that unites white and black. So a group of 3 has a characteristic also of wholeness that resonates with God's unity. However, it does not capture the concept as fully as 5. 5 is even more representative of that, okay? Which embraces 4 sides and unifies those 4 sides into a whole entity. So he's just showing us here why the similarity, what it is that the Shekinah attaches to. And it all has to do with these different groups being unified, that they have a concept of unity. Now he says, how do we know this even of 2? And then he tells us, 2 people interacting together bring a depth, as we mentioned before, to Torah study that is not available to an individual if you're studying by yourself. When 2 people study together, they unite into a pair, and the quality of 2 separate parts uniting is to a more modest degree, okay, a quality of God's unity. So for these reasons, the Shekinah is found more in some degree with two people than with one person. Then he wants to talk about this last verse that's mentioned from Shemot 20:21. I will come to you and bless you, about one person. God comes to us, he says. All of existence is the consequence of God. In other words, he causes all of existence. Our relationship with Hashem is defined by the fact that he is the source of mankind's existence. All right? Elah, the term Elah means he is the source, and that we are dependent, Alul, it's a play on words in Hebrew, we are dependent upon him. He is the source, Elah, and we are dependent, Alul, on him. As the source of human existence, and by the way, those are very famous concepts, they're found throughout all the Maharal's writings. That's one of those peculiar vocabularies that he uses. As the source of human existence, Hashem wants to be with those who are dependent upon him. And this is how he is with one. All right? And he's really talking about a level of consciousness here, that we as one, occupying ourselves with the Torah, whether it's in study or whether it's also in prayer or hitbodedut, prayer and meditation, whatever it is, that we have this consciousness that we are totally dependent upon him for absolutely everything. And that is a connection point with the Shekinah, a level of similarity, is what he's trying to say. As the source of human existence, Hashem wants to be with those who are dependent upon him. When there is a group of 10, which reflects his completeness, he brings his presence to them at his initiative. When the group is less than 10 people, then it's the group that initiates the relationship by engaging in study, and only then does the divine presence or the Shekinah come out of his love for his people, just as this verse says, I will come to you and bless you. All right? It's extremely interesting what this Mishnah is saying. That gives us a whole different take. Again and again, we see that the key to understanding so many things. I'm so thankful for Rabbi Yehuda Lev Ashlag, that God gave him literally the permission to reveal certain things that weren't talked about, because when he gives us the key to understanding things about the will to receive, and that this is what separates us, when he gives us that key, then we can go to the sages in so many things and see how they're talking about exactly the same thing, even though they may not be using exactly the same language. That really is the key that unlocks the door to almost everything. Okay. We move right to Mishnah number 8. We only have a few minutes left, so we're just going to read this Mishnah, okay, and pick it back up immediately. Rabbi Elazar ben Yehuda of Bartota. Now I know yours says Bartosa, but in Hebrew on the other side it's really Bartota, according to Israeli Sephardic pronunciation of Hebrew. All right? Says, give him from his own, for you and your possessions are his. And so he says, has David said, and he quotes from Divrei Hayamim, Aleph. Y'all know what this is. This is Divrei Hayamim, Chronicles in English, Chronicles, First Chronicles, 29:14, where King David says, for everything is from you, and from your own we have given you. So this will be a very interesting Mishnah that we find out, or that we will find in the next time we're together, and how it actually even ties, and how it really ties into the last one and the next one, and as the Maharal always is showing us. Okay. One other thing to mention that we won't have to mention the next time is Rabbi Basser has a note here that says the text that the Maharal uses, in other words, the text of Pirkei Avot, includes Ben Yehuda. Most other texts of Pirkei Avot don't include that. Ours says Rabbi Elazar ben Yehuda. You'll also read texts of Pirkei Avot that just says Rabbi Elazar of Bartota, okay? And he's pointing that out here. So the Maharal had a expanded text in some cases. We've already seen that before already. Okay, I hope it's helpful to you, what we were going through. I think it's actually extremely important doing this. It explains a lot of things, and it's also unbelievably good advice. And Pirkei Avot is something that we have to ingest every year, you know. We really study through Pirkei Avot many times every year because of the value of this wisdom that the sages of Israel are teaching us here. Okay, all right, I'm finished. And we'll start with Mishnah number 8, chapter 3, and Mishnah number 8 very next time. So shalom uvracha, peace and a blessing.
Thank you for joining us in our study. If you enjoyed this study and are interested in learning more from the Torah and the sages of Israel, then check us out on the internet at www.bfm101.com, or you may contact us toll-free at 1-800-639-0169. Our mailing address is Biblical Faith, P.O. Box 2, Abilene, Texas 79604. Until next time, we wish you shalom uvracha, peace and a blessing.